with that, I thought what I would do with my time here today is, hearkening back to Guy's presentation at the beginning, and Guy talked a lot about the power of storytelling. And I'm a real believer in the power of storytelling. I try to incorporate that in some of the things that we do, mainly because when you get into PowerPoint land, particularly when you get into, 8-point fonts and stuff like that, it's a little hard to keep track of the story sometimes. And we have had a story, a central narrative. It's one that will continue, but it's one that we created, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. We worked with Jeffrey Moore of Crossing the Chasm fame, and I think you saw a lot of slides during the course of the last couple of days that had the words system of record, system of engagement. Well, we invented that. That was the work that we did. If you're not familiar with that, you can still get it on the AIM website at aim.org/futurehistory. And the point of that exercise was to try to create a community asset that could be widely dispersed amongst a number of people that would talk about the changes that people were experiencing, that would talk about what was going on, that would try to put the past in a little bit of a context with the future, and essentially tell that story. And so one of the things that we were really pleased with that effort is that going around all sorts of places over the course of the last 2, 3, 4 years, I've seen that terminology and that presentation and some of those core concepts at the IBM IOD conference, at the Open Text Enterprise World Conference, at Oracle World, at BoxWorks, all sorts of different kinds of companies in the space. And so what we'd like to do moving forward, and with this presentation, is give you another asset. And we're releasing this right now. We spent the last couple of days talking about information chaos and information opportunity. And that white paper will be available to you. It's at the site info.aim.org/information-chaos-versus-opportunity. Man, I should have talked to my guys to shorten that URL a bit. Also, you should note that it doesn't need a www. Do a www, it takes you to a 404. Do this, you go straight to the report. And the thing I'd like to mention about this report, and it's also this presentation too, which I'll post on SlideShare once we're done, is these are intended to be community assets. So if this story helps you in carrying the message back to your managements and back to your organizations about some of the things that you need to do, some of the areas the organization needs to focus on, some of the priorities you need to have, that's what it's intended to do. So don't be shy about using it. This isn't like a Gartner report where it's under tight copyright protection and all that. This is intended as a community asset. So treat it like that, disseminate it, and get it out. But it's just released right now. We'll send a link. We'll put a link on the app as well. So check it out. I think you'll find it. This is what I'm going to talk about today. So I've got just 3 things. It's 2.5 days. I don't know that anybody could take much more than 3 things, so I'm just going to talk about 3 things. I want to talk about why information chaos, I think, is the most significant challenge for businesses and organizations in the next decade. I want to talk about where this came from, and I want to talk about what are some of the business questions you need to pose in your organization to get people to focus on turning chaos into opportunity. Now, in doing so, keep in mind the purpose of this is to tell a story. It's to try to put what we've done in the last few days into a bit of a context, to put it into a box, to put it in some ways that you can establish reference points amongst all the different things that you've heard over the last couple of days, and tell that story back into your organization. So when you think about this, this is a time of incredible opportunity. Just about everywhere you turn, just about every business magazine you want to read, basically says information is the world's new currency, and quotes like this from Gartner. Every budget is an IT budget. Every company is an IT company. Every business leader is becoming a digital leader. And all of this is true, and all of this, frankly, is incredibly exciting for those of us that have spent a lot of time in the information management space. But there's a dissonance here. You know, when I go around and talk to end user organizations, whether it's at events like this, you know, at roundtables earlier today, at some of the roadshow events that we do around the country, when it's on webinars, this is the kind of stuff I hear. So you've got all this opportunity, and yet this is what I hear. Our file servers are out of control. Nobody can find anything. I hear that information is leaking out of our organization. It's leaking out at an accelerated pace, and it's leaking out on devices that weren't even invented when we put all this stuff in place. I hear things like the volume of stuff, and not just documents, but stuff, is rapidly spinning out of control. I hear that people questioning some of their SharePoint investments, not so much from the soundness of the platform, but whether, you know, is that an appropriate platform for them? And how do I build on it if it is my platform? And if it's not my platform, what other tools are out there? What other tools do I need to integrate with SharePoint? So it's a big set of issues out there that people are wrestling with. I hear things from IT, you know, ticked off IT people. My own IT people probably say this, is that every time I turn around, the business is deploying something that we don't even know about. You know, they're end running us at every time I turn around. And when I talk to C-suite people, they tell me, you know, I can't believe that we're not getting more value out of the money that we spend on technology. And so we, as you know, call this information chaos. We think this is one of the fundamental business challenges facing us moving forward. And we think we're at a fundamental time in which organizations have to wrestle with this question of, are they going to step up to the bar and turn chaos into opportunity, and from opportunity into business benefit? And that's not an easy task, given the nature of the challenges. So let me talk about the cause and effects of all this. And you've seen this before. There are a lot of different causes, but we like to distill it down because when we talk to particularly senior business people, we want to put this in a context that's compact, that's portable, that they can understand, that they can relate to. And so we really put this in 3 buckets. And so the first one is this question of consumerization. And the relevance of consumerization, everything that we have experienced over the course of the last 5 to 10 years in the consumer realm, and how that carries over into the enterprise, is that it dramatically transforms what users expect from their applications, and it changes how we deliver it. The shorthand version of this is, I like to say, the world changed in December 2010, when all those C-suite people got iPads for Christmas, and then they came back in after the holidays and went to their IT people and said 2 things. First, how do I connect this to all of our business stuff? And secondly, why doesn't our business stuff work like this? The world changed, and we have been having a challenging time, frankly, getting around the dimensions of that change. Now, I think there's 4 things that are important to keep in mind with regards to consumerization. And this is from James McGivey's book, Digital Disruption. Would really urge you to take a look at it if you have a chance. It's a terrific book in terms of understanding the fundamental dynamic of consumerization. And what James talks about here is that there are 4 components to this consumerization disruption. You know, the first is the ubiquitousness of computers. Secondly, internet connections everywhere. Thirdly, standard programming languages and software development kits. And then fourth, the internet as a friction-free distribution platform. And what this means for the enterprise moving forward, what it means for businesses moving forward, is that we are constantly confronted with brand new things from people who didn't exist yesterday, with companies that can essentially end run us because they have started from scratch without all of our legacy baggage, and it dramatically changes the nature of the stakes associated with managing enterprise IT. So consumerization, first disruptor to keep in mind. Second one is cloud and mobile. Now, a lot of people often put these in separate buckets. I put them in the same bucket because I think the real impact of cloud and mobile is not so much what they do independently, but what they do in concert with each other. They're almost like steroids from each other that really multiply the impact that each has in our organization. And so what it does is it creates this expectation that I can access information anywhere, on any device, at any time. And when you think about that challenge, that is a pretty fundamental challenge moving forward. You think about mobile technologies and what this has meant, what the iPhone has meant, what Android phones have meant. One of the quotes that I really like that came from one of our own meetings is in the lower left-hand corner here. In 45 seconds, you can go from never having heard a song to owning it. And it's this collapse of business cycles that's at the heart, I think, of the impact ultimately that mobile has on our business and information management practices. The second piece, when you start thinking about the cloud, is I think the real key quote there is in the upper right-hand corner from Joe McKendrick from Forbes magazine. And what he's talking about here is that often people spend all their time thinking about the cost benefits of cloud technologies. And I think what Joe's point here, which is an important one for us to think about, is that the cost benefits, yes, are there. They're probably not as dramatic sometimes as the cloud proponents would like us to think. But the real key to understanding the cloud is how it affects how we think about the business itself. That's the transformative aspect. That, in the context of mobile, put them together, and you've got a rich and powerful steroid that challenges us moving forward. The third disruptor is this question, and I loved Alan's point earlier about flat hierarchies. I didn't put this together before I had heard this. The future is flat and agile, not hierarchical and slow. And frankly, most of our organizations are somewhat hierarchical and somewhat slow. I can tell you this from the association management business that I'm in. AIIM is a pretty lean organization when it comes to hierarchy and structure. But I know in all my peer organizations, when I go to the American Society of Association Executives, which is where all us guys hang out, people talk about those rigid hierarchies, that were geared to, operations 10, 20, 30 years ago. And that's the future that we have to drive toward and have to overcome, is getting to flat, getting to agile, and that is really tied to technology and how we deploy it as well. There was a touch on this in Dion's presentation earlier today. If you haven't looked at the Gallup State of the American Workplace, it is really a terrific document to look at. I would also recommend there's another document from Cisco that talks about the patterns of young people and how they view technology and how they view work moving forward. And you put those two together and you can get a really interesting mosaic and look at the future of why we have to change. Most of us in this room are from the email generation. That is all leaving the station pretty quickly. And I think the challenge is how do we figure out how we tap into our human resources and mobilize them and engage them, and not just because it feels good, not just because we want to give them cool social tools that look like Facebook, but because when we engage employees, we create better business results. And that's at the heart of that Gallup study. What they looked at was 12 different parameters of performance. They mapped it back to engagement parameters of performance, and they came up with the fact that there is a huge multiple for people that are connected. Now, this isn't just a technology question. You can have great technology and a sucky culture, and you're not gonna be on that red line up here. But you put the two together, put good culture, good technology, and you've got a leg up on people. This is just astonishing when you think that the average company in the US, the average organization, has only about a third of its people engaged, has 49% of the people that are not engaged. That's bad enough, but man, those 18%, with the tongue out the mouth on the phone to the customer, that's where our real problem is. And you can change that mindset in your organization But like I say, it is not just technology, it is also culture and thinking about how you overcome that. So as we think about this, and we're not shy about saying this, I think this is the golden time for people that are in this space to help their organizations meet these challenges, because this is the fundamental business challenge. You know, we have sucked about all the productivity gains that we can out of how we manage data in our organizations. You know, what we have to do now is get gains and get benefit out of all the rest of the stuff, which is what we all focus on. You know, you think about everything that has happened in the last 20 or 30 years of enterprise technology. You know, the migration from mainframes to minis to PCs. It's really all been about streamlining data and sucking efficiency out of the system and, you know, getting as much productivity as we can out of technology. You know, now it's about something a little bit different. And so I'd like to propose Mancini's Law. And here it is. Enterprises at scale are a system of information networks, and the smooth flow of information is dependent on clear and predictable connections between the networks. So think of an organization. All it really is, ultimately, is a set of information networks and how those networks connect together. Second, the points of connection between the networks. Think of this as overcoming the silo problem, if you want to go back into the legacy of this space. The points of connection, and in fact, actually, the operations of each of those individual networks in and of themselves will become increasingly unstable as the size and complexity of each network grows exponentially. So you have the volume, the velocity, the variety of information coming in. It's increasing that volume in the network on exponential basis, 50% per year, if you believe all the studies. And that is going to threaten the stability of those systems. And my contention, and this is where I think as we talk about information governance, it is so much more than records management. It is a strategic imperative for organizations, because without intervention, I think the resulting information chaos will threaten the viability of an entire system because of the complexity that's being lodged in those individual networks. Now, if you think, it's just words, you know, what is this all about? I was thinking about how is this relevant to some things that we all experience on a day-to-day basis. And I think one place in which we experience a variety of networks that are connected into our systems is in any metropolitan area in the coming and going to work. And so if you want a graphic representation of Mancini's Law, and I think what information chaos ultimately means, it's this. This is a traffic jam in São Paulo in 2009. Some of the most interesting Google searches you can do are massive traffic jams and hit the image key. This is what happens when networks are overcharged and when the connections between networks become broken. Everything comes to a grinding halt. And that, at some level, is the threat that we have as you look out and think about how 50% year over year, decade over decade, starts to manifest itself. And if we don't start thinking about how we take more cars off the highway, metaphorically, we're going to wind up like this in terms of information management. So I think the way organizations need to think about these challenges, hence this white paper, it needs to change. You know, this is not a time for business as usual. I think as we think about this, I think we need to help our organizations understand the characteristics of information chaos. You know, it's things like, you know, our systems of record and systems of engagement being misaligned. You know, it means the leakage that we talked about earlier. It means the speed at which stuff is coming. You know, more silos, all of those things that we are wrestling with right now. I think information professionals need to help our organizations figure out how we turn that into information opportunity. But I think our challenge, and this is particularly an AIM challenge, doesn't end there. Because in order to square the circle with the business, in order to square the circle with the C-suite, in order to square the circle with the people that approve the funds to do the middle column, we've got to sell the far column. We have got to start talking about this much more aggressively in terms of the results that are created by the expenditure rather than what the expenditure is for. What is the business benefit? How does information governance create value? How does it help me mitigate risk? How does it help me cut cost? And then the real key is how does it help me create value? If we don't answer those questions, and we don't answer them in a more intelligent way, then information governance is just about the risk of incarceration, which is kind of the way that sort of the industry has sold information governance over the course of the last 5 years. We will fail. And the sad thing about it is our organizations will fail as well. So the last thing I want to talk about is this question of, how do you frame the discussion? And we've spent a lot of time thinking about this over the course of the last 6 to 12 months with the AIIM board. And I think one of the things that we've realized as we've talked to a lot of people is that, all of us collectively have probably spent far too much time talking about the technology building blocks. And you always think of all those stack diagrams of all those charts and all those technologies. And what you're increasingly going to see from AIIM is that we're trying to talk much more aggressively about the business questions that people need to ask. The key thing that's going on with content is lots of times the word content doesn't appear in those business questions. But it does appear as a core enabling technology that allows you to solve those business questions. And that's how I think we have to start talking about this much more aggressively. So when you think about this, and as you try to sell what you do to your organizations, what we've tried to do here is basically break the business questions into 4 buckets. And they are a risk-based bucket, there is a process transformation and automation bucket, there is an engagement bucket, and there is a business insight bucket. And so as we increasingly move forward, the way to sell this is not to talk about content management and records management and business process management and taxonomy and all that. Those are the tools we need. That's the middle column on that previous chart that I had that we all need to understand. But what we have to do is translate that into these kinds of questions, because this ultimately is the kinds of questions that the business is going to care about. And so over the course of the next 2, 3, 4 months, you're going to start to see a transformation in terms of how AIIM communicates about this. Much less emphasis on technology and much more trying to answer these business questions for people. And so we will really welcome your involvement and your support and your interest as we do that. And any of this that you want to steal in terms of helping sell solutions inside your organization, please have at it, and you're welcome to. So again, we have just released the report. Download it, take a look at it, let us know what you think about it. This presentation will go along with it. There'll probably be also presentations that will follow. All of those are community assets. All of those are things that you can use for your own purposes. You don't need to ask. Love to have an AIM.org at the bottom of any of it for attribution. But please feel free to use them. They are community assets. So, thank you all very much for your time. As you can see, we are going to be in San Diego next year from March 18th to 20th.